we know tech is evolving at a lightning speed, like there's always something new on the horizon. Do you find any sectors which are absolutely going to explode?
So for me, fintech. I think fintech has been quite advantageous.
Even though shows like Shark Tank have given us a taste of the investment world, still some of the folks might still be a bit fuzzy on the details. So for our listeners who are just tuning in, could you just break down what venture capital is and how does it fuel the startup ecosystem?
Venture capital is capital, so money for ventures, i.e. startups, so small to medium-sized enterprises, to help them go from A to B or from B to C.
Do you believe in superstition? So do you find unconsciously or even consciously any biases to play in the VC industry for women-led startups? Never have I ever took a sick leave when I wasn't. I have during my internship.
You say that in front of your intern. Be careful. He's on
I'm
set.
sure even he does.
Welcome to the club.
Ew. Never have I ever Googled myself. I have.
And you should.
Hello everyone. So today on the show we have got the incredible Dr. Bijna Kotak Dasani, a total powerhouse advocating for women's empowerment and a venture capitalist who breaks barrier. Bijna, for those unfamiliar, is a force to be reckoned with. She started by conquering Wall Street with leadership roles at Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank. Bijna's influence extends far beyond financial acumen. She is a passionate advocate for shattering glass ceilings and empowering women to claim their rightful place. Throughout her impressive career, the list of awards that she has won is endless. In the conversation today, Bijna will share her insights on the exciting world of venture capital, the challenges and triumphs women face in the industry, and her vision for the future, where women are not just a growing force, but a dominant presence. Hi Bijna, so welcome to the show. Really excited to have you here today.
Hi, Mahima. I'm so happy to be with you. Thank you for having me on your first ever podcast. I'm super excited.
So first of all, how are you?
I'm doing well. I would say a little jet lag, but that's not really a thing given how much traveling I've been doing lately. Happy to be back in Mumbai.
How's the Bombay heat treating you?
It's quite humid, but
Yeah.
that said, I love the evenings, especially when it comes to sunset.
Yes.
Being somewhere where you can see the skyline of Mumbai at
Yes.
night is just
That's
stunning.
the
So
magic.
yeah, it's my favorite place
Yeah.
to be.
So I listened to a bunch of your interviews lately, and based on our last meeting, I feel I couldn't say this enough, but you're truly an inspiration for me, for all the young women and entrepreneurs out there. So to get started, I always love hearing about people's background. So what was your childhood like growing up in the UK? Any fun or crazy memories to share with us?
Well, firstly, thank you for your kind words. And I'm equally inspired by you, and I love what you're doing. So more power to you.
Thank you.
And coming to the question about my childhood, honestly, I was discussing with someone last week. I feel like my childhood was very simple compared to how children are today and what the definition of childhood today is. For me, the simple pleasures were, baking with my mom or looking forward to festivals and decorating our home.
Yeah.
And being in the UK and being British Indian of African descent, because my parents are from East Africa, it was a case of celebrating everything, a mix of languages, culture, festivals. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed arts. I enjoyed spending time in nature. There wasn't really any technology, and I think I'm making up for it now because I'm always glued to my devices. But I look at kids now, and I spend time taking music lessons. I did Kathak, harmonium,
Nice.
other dance lessons, Bhangra. I mean, my mom used to teach in my school at one point, which was nice. I tried to learn salsa, flamenco, a whole bunch of things, piano lessons. I was in a band. We played steel pans, but I just can't see kids doing so much of that now because a lot of their time, particularly in India, somebody gave me a stat recently, 60% plus of children's time is spent on digital devices.
That is true.
And it's interesting because I feel that the next generation of humanity is changing. It's heavily technology influenced. Now, there are benefits to that, but I do feel it also takes away some of the development from an EQ perspective. So yeah, my childhood is very different to what childhood is defined as today. Makes me feel ancient.
Yeah. I think you did almost everything.
I did a lot.
Yeah. So before jumping to the next question, I was wondering, I read this somewhere. Research says people who make like a lot of money very quickly often end up hating themselves subconsciously. So do you, Bijna?
Uh, depends on what you're implying. I think look, I think you have to learn to understand yourself.
Yeah.
I've been through my journeys in life, like most of us have, and I wouldn't be human if I hadn't. I moved to a school of thought about 7 years ago. I became very close to, at that time, what could have been the end of my life. So I went through something, and it was quite serious. And I got through it, and I'm here, and I'm very thankful for everyone that helped me get through it. But ultimately, it made me question my existence, my choices, and my purpose. And so I've moved to a school of thought that talks about ascension through the spiritual realms. And I've moved to a school of thought that for me means that I live a life of existence that's on a different vibrational frequency, right? So for me, everything now is about energy. I think if you get into the rat race, and it's quite easy to get into the rat race and then be sucked into it for just material reasons, or for illusion, as we call it, Maya, right, in India.
Yeah.
I think that's so easily done. And I think it's very easy to be susceptible to the traps that brings without even realizing it. So a lot of people do. I think for me, because I kind of saw my almost rebirth in life as I define it, I just felt that there must be a bigger purpose. And so for me, the biggest journey is getting to know myself. And, I can't say I'm full of self-love all the time, but I'm learning to appreciate myself better, and maybe in ways that I appreciate people and situations around me. So I think my starting point with everything is gratitude, right? I'm grateful every morning for my life. I'm grateful to wake up. I'm grateful to have my friends and family. I'm grateful to have sunlight, the views in Mumbai, everything that life is offering me. And I think when you start with gratitude, everything follows. So for me, consciously and subconsciously, that's now my wiring. Gratitude, seeing the lessons, and maybe realizing that things are not for your vibrational frequency if they don't work out. And if they are, then you're probably on the right path. But it's been a journey. I have to say, if I'm completely honest, there were probably years where I was just flat out working and going through the BAU of life, right? People say you go through life and the first milestone is graduation. Next milestone is your job. Next milestone is getting married. Next milestone is having children, buying a bigger car, buying a bigger house, buying the next, kind of into the next investment, and kind of elevating. All of those things are great.
Yeah.
But if they're not fulfilling, why are we doing them, right? Because we don't bring anything with us when we're born. We don't take any of that with us.
Yeah.
But if we're constantly struggling to get to the next milestone, there must be some value for it. And so for me, fulfillment, materialisms, all of that is now interconnected to gratitude.
So, even though shows like Shark Tank have given us a taste of the investment world, but still, some of the folks might still be a bit fuzzy on the details. So, for our listeners who are just tuning in, could you just break down what venture capital is and how does it fuel the startup ecosystem?
Yeah. So in a very simple layman's kind of format, I can explain that venture capital is capital, so money for
Okay.
ventures, i.e. startups, so small to medium-sized enterprises, to help them go from A to B or from B to C or, onwards. So it can be money that is injected into a business based on A, the actual outcome of your business while it's running and the potential that that's demonstrating, or B, the market landscape analysis around your business. So going back to Shark Tank, right? Sometimes you'll see initiatives that are already in existence. So they're operating in one state in India, for example. They're generating X amount of revenue. And the judges may turn around and say, well, actually, India has a population of 1.4 billion people. Why are you only offering it to, the 1 CR of people in your city? Let's scale it, right? If you scale it to the 1.4 million people, that increases your market access, right? And therefore your profit, your volume will go up, your profit margin will go up, because that demographic of customer that you're targeting exists in places, that are within easy reach, and it's easy to scale. So it's about scaling your business. Or it could be, some of the things that we do, right? in my day job. We help companies focus on structuring. So for example, there's a company that we just recently helped that was manufacturing in Australia, and that was fine for them because they were manufacturing and selling in Australia and they wanted to move into a new market. So we helped them with that. Or there's a company that's in Israel, and Israel obviously is involved in the geopolitical situation right now. So we're helping them with market access and entry into another geography. And venture capital funding is helping them achieve that. So it's helping them hire the people, set up the offices, go in and do the work in those new markets so that they can scale. So sometimes it can be your home market, sometimes it can be other markets. Sometimes it can just be as simple as I've got more orders coming in than I've got capacity to manufacture for. Or, I mean, for example, you could say to me, I've got my label, right? I've got label Mahima Sethiya.
Yeah.
Bijna, I've suddenly got, 1,000 orders over Diwali. Sales are booming, right? I need some investment to scale because I need more people and more machinery to get all these orders out in time for Diwali. Be a very simple example of where a venture capital conversation may come in.
I'm sure this will clear the theory. So, as we know, the startup scene is quite like a roller coaster ride, like a thrilling one. Fast paced, exciting, and pretty risky, definitely. And also, we have seen some big players like Paytm and Byju's hit some major bumps along the way. How do you, as a VC, manage the risk, or like what are some of the strategies involved here?
Yeah, and I think you make some very valid points because this is something that is coming up at almost every table discussion I'm having, right? What happened in India? What happened with Paytm? What happened with Byju's? What is the role of the regulator? What is the role of the government? What is the role of the ecosystem, right? Does there need to be more stringent regulation to assess and govern some of these growth stories? Because growth is great, but as you said earlier, a lot of growth very fast can result in negative challenges that people sometimes have blind spots to. As someone who sits on the investment committees and boards of venture capital funds in different parts of the world, I can tell you that one thing that's always a concern for me is getting to know the governance, the operational structure that really supports these companies. And I think sometimes, look, you can be a small team and you're growing really fast and your focus is to focus on that growth because you need to respond to the media, the market, your investors, and the pressure is on. The flip side of that is you do also need people who are going to keep your foundation strong, who focus on the operations, on keeping your engine oiled, who focus on, alerting you if there are any red flags as they occur and nipping those in the bud. And I think what happens is you end up having inadvertently blind spots where if you don't have enough people looking at things from a different lens coming together, it can be quite easy to land up in a situation where things do go pear-shaped. And quite often, I'll give you an example, right? If I was to say that, you, me, and a few others in the room today, we form a circle. We form a circle and we're all looking inwards. We're going to have that siloed view. We're only focusing on growth and next steps and how do we get Mahima Sethiya to the next trajectory, right? Investors are watching, regulators are watching, everybody's watching. I think what you need is a circle where people are holding hands, but they're all looking outwards. So then you've got somebody looking at the financials, somebody looking at the governance, somebody looking at the investor relations, somebody looking at regulation, and coming together and saying, we're still going to be a tight, solid team, but we all have to look at different verticals to be able to be stronger every day. And I think that is something that, in my view, may help kind of the next pear-shaped story. And that's something that we look at very closely. So we reserve the rights to get involved on an operational level, to request governance on an ongoing basis, to have deep dives and audits. And I think that's very important. Even on the audits, right? I was reading recently that the Big Four in London, they failed to pick up 75% of bankruptcies that have happened through audits that they did last year. That's a staggering number. Now, partly there's an economic situation going on in the UK, but partly it means that we need to change how we do things. We need to change how we look at operations and governance. And I think, again, that's where we all have a role to play in a broader discussion.
So, Bijna, we know tech is evolving at a lightning speed. Like there's always something new on the horizon. So, looking over to the next decade, do you find any sectors which are absolutely going to explode? Any trend or sector?
So for me, fintech is always an interesting one. So that's financial services and technology, and it's one that I've been playing with for many years. I think fintech has been quite advantageous in that it has opened up literacy and accessibility to financial products for a lot of people globally who traditionally didn't have them, right? And I'll give you an example. The UPI store in India, it's phenomenal. We now have France and the Maldives and other, parts of the world following lead and saying we're going to adopt the UPI interface. But I think what it's done, just if we look at recent years like the pandemic, is it has given people who don't have access to traditional information about financial services products access. You can be sitting in Bharat, which is like 60% of India, right? Versus the metro cities. You can be sitting in Bharat, making a UPI payment and getting things delivered to your door because you know how to transact on UPI. You may not be fully literate in English or in numeracy, but you can transact, which is a great starting point. And so what that's doing is that's enabling the underbanked and the unbanked population to come into the financial services ecosystem. And then there's a step-by-step process to upskill them, uplift them, and integrate them more where they can be offered propositions around, let's say, mortgages, insurance, home loans, really to kind of bring up their socioeconomic stance, right? Because it's then creating accessibility to products and provisions that potentially were designed for them but never reached them historically. And I see other countries also doing that and benefiting from that. So I think fintech, the market is due to scale by another 5x by 2035. I think that's an exciting and an interesting story. The flip side of that is we have to be careful around vulnerable customers. So if you're not financially literate, if you're not literate with numeracy, you don't understand that you're signing up to a very high interest rate on a credit card, for example, you accumulate debt, that can land you in a very difficult place. So you could be a vulnerable customer. I think the other thing is fraud, right? That's increasing with the accessibility to technology. There is a lot of increase in fraud. So let's say you have your UPI payment or your mobile banking payment, and you click through to a service that can offer you, I don't know, discounts on your Mahima Sethiya outfits, right? But there could be a hack there that then means that you get exposed. There's an attack on your device, and something that then affects, your transaction, which can take money from you, or it can take details about your identity, and it can leave you in a more vulnerable state. There was a report recently that said, and I think this was by one of the big four, and they said that if there was one significant payments fraud event globally, it would cost the world economy $3.5 trillion US. So the potential of technology to create a widespread mass destruction through fintech is also pretty high. So, as with anything, you have to weigh it up. I think fintech is one. The other is Gen AI. So there was an article last year where the Wall Street Journal was saying that, Gen AI is disastrous. It's taking away people's jobs. Everything is kind of robo-technology. People are losing incomes. It's causing an economic crisis. And this was a very US-centric lens. In the same week in India, there was a story that was issued that said Gen AI is fantastic. Gen AI is upskilling women. It's putting them on par with their female counterparts in other parts of the world. It's from a salary perspective, it's raising the bar. And basically, if women in our smaller towns and villages can be working from home in Gen AI roles and be generating a higher salary, it's basically uplifting their families, uplifting their communities, and it's very powerful. So again, I think it's the same product and subject we're talking about, right? But two extreme opposite views in different parts of the world in the same week. And for me, that was quite powerful because, again, I think what we do with technology, how we utilize it, and how we choose to embrace it, both as society, culturally, socially, I think all of those factors have a role to play.
Yeah, it has like both con and pros to look
Yes.
at. Yeah, just like Instagram.
Absolutely.
Fun question. Do you ever find your job like boring, as it's all about being serious and numbers flying around all the time?
I actually, knock on wood, I love what I do.
Yeah.
So I worked in capital markets, so in banking for about 20 years. I lived and worked all over the world. And I must say it was exhausting. So just last night I was discussing with a family member that, I lived in the US and I went to work on Wall Street many years ago. And there was a time where the worst hurricane in 100 years hit. And there was no electricity, no heating, no generator in my building. I was living in a beautiful glass building in the middle of Manhattan. But it was 37 flights of stairs and I had to go up and down every day because there was no work from home. And there were no Ubers in those days, so I'm old. But, it was a case of then changing 2 buses to get into the office, 2 buses to get back. It was 2 hours each way. On the outside, it looked very glorified, like I'm working on Wall Street, I'm living the dream in Manhattan. On the inside, this is everything that was going on because the infrastructure wasn't there. And, we were discussing that every Sunday morning, this is before Zoom was there. So every Sunday morning, I'd have to take a bus at 3 in the morning to be in at 4:45 for video conferencing with Singapore. So it wasn't exactly, in your early 20s, having to go to bed so early on a Sunday and then do that trek even in the winter when you have snowstorms on a Monday morning. It wasn't that great. So I think there are definitely things that I would have preferred to be in today's environment where we have Uber and we have Zoom and we have work from home. But equally, it taught me a lot. Look, it taught me discipline. It taught me to be resilient. It taught me to be a little bit more tolerant. And so I think those things are the things that help me now that I'm doing my own thing. So I transitioned into the world of venture capital and venture partnerships. And, initially I didn't have a team. I was starting out something new on my own as an entrepreneur, which has been quite scary. But that discipline, that tenacity, those lessons that I learned, they helped me get out of bed every morning very early and just crack on, right? And just kind of work through it. And now I have the support of a wonderful team. But, it takes that inner strength to get up, to find your purpose, to be motivated even when things are not, clear and you sort of don't know which direction you're navigating things in because you've never done this before. So I think it's all been fun, but in different shapes and sizes. And I think right now I get to choose who I work with, which is the most beautiful aspect. I do have a lot of fun because, I just talked earlier about the fact that I've just been on a nonstop travel breeze. But quite frankly, I've had beautiful meals and conversations almost every evening through my travels because I'm blessed to know a lot of people that I now consider friends that I'm also working with. So yeah, I do make the most of it.
That's nice. So I'm really curious to know this one, and I think you'll be the perfect one to answer. So do you find unconsciously or even consciously any biases to play in the VC industry for women-led startups?
Absolutely. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. But let's put that into context as well. So we know that less than 3% of all VC funding went to women globally. Having spent a few decades in capital markets, the India example aside that I just gave you, I was quite often the only female in a room. In fact, I wrote a research paper on this when I was doing something at the University of Oxford a few years ago to understand why there are so few women in the C-suite in financial services globally. And a couple of things came out. One is lack of visible role models. So women who come through the ranks, they get, it's kind of a 50-50 proportionate split at graduate level. As they progress through their lives, you kind of end up at kind of this middle age stage, which is where you're maybe in your early 30s. You get married, you have a child, you get your first senior manager role in your career because you've worked for a few years to get there. And, you're stretched. You're stretched at work and you're stretched at home, and both need a lot more attention and time from you. So things have to give. And if the provisions are not there to support you at work, that is typically what has had to give for women in the workplace historically. And again, this isn't me, this is the data. So how do we fix this, right? There are things that we can do. We can create more visible role models, but we can also educate the male counterparts to be allies both at work and at home, so that if they start to share on balance the load at home and at work, it becomes easier, and then women too can continue on that trajectory. So I think that's one practical step we can take. The other is we need to realize that we are living in the world and we're the byproducts of a world where gender norms are very different when we were born, when our parents were born, right? So I can tell you, I worked for a bank in the UK for a few years where I learned that the daughter of someone in my team, she basically ended up working in my team, and she said, oh, my mother was asked to leave the bank a few years ago. And I said, why? And she said, well, a few years ago, because it was just when I was born and she was 20 something. And I said, explain that to me. Why was she asked to leave? And she said, because she was a woman. I said, well, what does that mean? Explain it to me. Well, she said, Bijna, there was not a law to prevent women from working in banking in the 90s, but there was a system and an expectation where if you got married, the signal was that you were not competent to work and you would be stretched and divided, so you needed to give up your role. And she said, my mom was like, a strong leader in those days, and she got married on the weekend and she came into work on the Monday and they said, you need to resign. And if you don't resign, we'll fire you. And so, of course, she resigned and she had to give up her career. And she said, we're so lucky that doesn't happen to us because now we're more cognizant of, gender equality. But in the 90s, that was pretty recent, right? And we also have to understand that that has a knock-on consequence to why there are fewer women in some of these industries and sectors today, and therefore why there is a margin around women, whether it's receiving funding, whether it's in senior leadership roles, it's a knock-on effect. So that's one. The other side of the coin is what's going to happen to the future generations. So again, today's a Saturday, but let's take yesterday or Monday, there will have been 130 million girls on this planet that were not permitted to go to school. This doesn't mean they're not able to afford school or they don't have access to school. It means they're not permitted to go to school. Now, why is that? Cultural norms, social norms, geopolitical situations. If we are preventing this generation of children to get an education, and they're predominantly girls, then of course that generation in another 5, 10, 15 years coming into the workforce is going to be male dominant, right? It is something that we cannot control. The deficit is going to continue to be there. And so again, there is corrective action that probably needs to be taken, which is bigger than my gift and your gift and our gift combined. But I think these are things that we have zero influence over to a great extent. We can absolutely raise awareness, but I think, there are larger steps and decisions that need to be taken to enforce what gender equality in the future looks like, and also understand that gender equality or inequality today is a byproduct of what's happened in the last, years preceding us.
So then how do you differentiate which women to give the funding or which to not? There must be some criteria.
So I think for me, when it comes to allocating investment or capital, it's not really about is it a male or a female. Of course, I want to make sure that we are attracting the females because they're underrepresented and underserved. So I want to make sure that we are doing the outreach to tell them this is available to you. This is something that could support your business. This is something that you should absolutely consider, right? Because sometimes if there are less women receiving funding from venture capital, then it's quite likely that in their circle, they will be surrounded by less women who actually know how the system works or how to go about trying to apply for that funding or even where to go, for example, right? So I think that's one aspect. The other aspect is it's about the proposition, right? It's about the product or the service. That is what's going to drive ultimately the investment decision. So if it makes sense economically, then of course it shouldn't matter if it's being led by a team of men or women. The funding should be made available.
But then does it matter? It shouldn't, but then does it?
I think there is a case in some studies that says that, the majority of venture capital funding is going to male-led ventures because the majority of decision makers are men and there is a subconscious bias. So that is a school of thought that exists. To prove it is actually very hard.
Do you think this can be one of the reasons that we are noticing a gap in leadership roles? Why don't we see more women at the top across various industries?
Totally. The data says this. And again, this goes back to my research paper I did when I was at Oxford. If you look at any sector, any geography, anywhere in the world, right? Women are only around 20-ish%, give or take a little bit, in the most senior leadership roles. I mean, take politicians, for example, right? How many prime minister women do we have? Or presidents as women do we have around the world versus men? Okay, let's take aviation. Let's take real estate. Let's take hospitality. Typically, the leaders are men and women are far and few in between. And I saw that in banking too. However, what I will say is I feel that we're living in a time where we are, as a human race, more awake than ever. And I think the pandemic, again, accelerated some of this, where we're having more important conversations just like this to say, diversity is important. Diversity feeds your P&L. Inclusion is important. We have to be mindful of subconscious bias. Now, I will say we also have to be mindful of positive bias. We can't just be all, pro women and make the men feel like they can't even walk into the room because they're walking on eggshells. I think it has to be a joint exercise. There has to be allyship. We have to guide the men who are the leaders, who are the majority, to what we need as women. And it goes down to the fact that we are physiologically different, left brain and right brain, and that communication has to happen. And in my view, having worked primarily in male-dominated industry for my entire career, men are willing to listen. And some of my strongest allies have been male managers, male mentors. And I think that is very powerful, because I think the minute you say to them, this is what I need, or this is where I need help, because they've not faced it, they may not have thought about it, but the minute you flag it, they're willing to do what it takes to be an ally, for the most part, in my experience. Equally, I think women need to lift each other up. There is a school of thought around the Queen Bee syndrome, which is basically, a lot of research backs this up globally, to say that women get into very senior roles and consciously or subconsciously, they block the door for other women. And it's not that they're trying to prevent other women from rising, but they feel that, oh my God, it's like climbing a mountain. I've worked so hard to get here.
To protect themselves.
Yes, I have to protect my territory. I have to just embrace this role, give it my best, still need to prove myself to get to the next level. This has to be my territory. I cannot afford any type of competition. Now, that is also difficult, because that takes away the role models that the emerging leaders need, especially women. Also, it takes away allyship. Having allyship from men is great, but having allyship from women as a woman, for me, is even more powerful, right? And I think you all help each other rise, and that's my school of thought. But I think the Queen Bee syndrome is also, it's something that is quite often subconscious, and it needs work and it needs support. And I think a lot of companies are now implementing policies to recognize and then help address that.
We don't see VC industry being overrun by women. So what are some of the challenges or hurdles that you face or women face in the industry?
Again, I would go down to it being very, very male dominated.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I just take the last 4 weeks of extensive travel and back-to-back meetings I've been having from morning till night, I've included women who are friends and colleagues in my discussions, but they're probably less than 5% of the people that I've actually been having business meetings with and closing work with. So I think, and that is just very recent, and it's across multitude of countries. So it's a synonymous theme, right? So I think that is something that will take time to address. I think there are now communities. So for example, I look forward to London Tech Week every year, because they have a European Women in VC community where we have an amazing roundtable and great things happening. So I think there are now communities that are coming together to help create the right messaging, to bring in male allies, to create the right provisions for women to be employed in the industry and have the right access. And also, if you're coming from, let's say, banking like I did, or from a complementary surrounding industry, what's your pathway to get into VC, right? How do you reskill and upskill yourself to get in and learn and then kind of deliver? So I think there is more of that, but we definitely still have a lot of work to do.
How can we help or contribute to the situation?
I think mentorship is a beautiful way.
Okay.
So I think if there are people who are in the industry that are conscious about this and want to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion in the venture capital ecosystem, I think, be a mentor, be an informal mentor, even a formal mentor, share your experiences. I think that is important, but also the most innate human need is to be heard and to be seen. So also listen, be a sounding ear for someone. I think those small measures where we can all take out half an hour for a coffee with somebody that may reach out to us, or we can offer that up. We can, ask someone how they're doing and help re-steer their career into this ecosystem. I think that is definitely time well spent.
Bijna, do you believe in superstition?
No.
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 So
Not today. Some time ago I may have done, but not anymore.
no. So you had any ritual that you would follow before any significant meeting or any conference?
Honestly, I'm just going to go back to manifesting.
Yeah.
Manifest good things. Put good vibes out into the universe. Own it, right? I think if I'm going into an important meeting, to be quite frank, I think there's no substitute for hard work.
Yeah.
Working hard and working smart. So if I go into a meeting and I'm not prepared, inadvertently, I'm not going to be confident. I'm going to be feeling like, oh my God, I don't know what questions they're going to throw at me. I'm not sure if I should have spent an hour just prepping myself. And that nervousness will show. It'll show on my face. It'll show in my body language. It'll translate that I'm not the best version of myself. And I think if I go into a meeting and I know broadly who I'm meeting and what the subject area is, even if I spend 15 minutes on my car right there doing my notes, I'll go in, with a stronger footing. So I think hard work, for me, it defies superstition. There's no place for superstition if there's hard work and there's commitment. And I think, if you go in with a positive mindset, if you just perceive that good will happen, the other person will be positive, you'll have a healthy conversation. Even if something doesn't come out of it, you've made an engagement. Yeah. There is a connection that's been built. You never know. It's a small ecosystem. That connection, you may cross paths with somebody else somewhere later down the line, but you're building equity, you're building currency through that relationship. It's a good start. Not everything has to have an outcome.
Yeah. You've taken a step.
Exactly. So perceive, believe, achieve.
Okay. So shifting gears a bit. Mm-hmm. Here at Mahima City, we believe that fashion is all about making smart choices, and I'm sure investment is also. So let's say you have meeting to attend to or any important event. So do you have any particular outfit that you always prefer or any style statement that you would like to go for?
I think in terms of outfit, one thing you'll see me carrying often is a blazer. Because I think you can dress up an outfit or dress it down with or without a blazer. And I think you can use a blazer for work, you can use it for casual, or you can use it for dining. So I think for me, that is a very versatile piece to have. Mm-hmm. And I have many pieces in many colors. So I love blazers. I think they're a statement for me. And I'm always carrying at least one. Second thing I love to carry is perfume. I think that is very personal.
Yeah, so do I.
But it just makes me feel good. Again, going into a meeting, I love to just know that I'm, have a nice scent. And I think those are the two things that I love to carry.
So do you feel there's your outfit choice has an impact on how you approach towards a given situation?
I think it can definitely boost your confidence.
Yeah, it can.
So I think outfits are important. I think being well-dressed, being presentable, I think it makes a huge difference, right? Because it speaks for you. It says a lot about you. If you go into a meeting where you've thought about who you're meeting with, what environment you're meeting them in, and you're dressed appropriately, versus if you show up in your glad rags and what you're comfortable in when you're sitting at home watching Netflix, I think it sends a signal about what you represent. And I think we all have different avatars, right? I love my watching Netflix and kind of Jim Jam's avatar. Okay. But equally, I know that I wouldn't carry myself well if I went in a very kind of unpolished situation where I was trying to get something delivered, because you become a distraction, right? The optics can either create a distraction or they can create a reflection of what you're trying to represent in that discussion. So I think it's very important to be conscious and focus on the reflection part rather than a distraction part.
So, last but not the least, for all the ambitious women out there making waves in the startup world or even VC, what advice would you give them?
Be the best version of yourself that you can be every day and don't give up trying to get there. I actually feel that women are a very powerful force and a force to reckon with. And I think being a woman is a privilege in many ways. And I think bringing out some of the traits of our femininity are beautiful. And in the world of business, I've seen so many amazing things happen. I think you can embrace that. I think you can channel that. And I think you can make that your superpower, and you can continue to build on that till you get to where you want to be.
So the last one, how do you feel doing a podcast with a Gen Z?
I think I'm learning a lot from you. So I'm super excited to be here. And as I was saying offset, I really am so honored to be here for your first one. And I hope this is the first of at least 1,000 for you.
Thank you so much.
I think you are phenomenal. And you are definitely that force to reckon with. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad that I'm doing my first one with you. And I'm glad that I bumped into you that day. I I literally gathered the courage to go and meet you that day.
I'm very happy that you did.
All right, Bijna. So the conversation has truly been inspiring. And to wrap things up, let's have little fun and play a game called Never Have I Ever.
Okay.
So we have a bowl of chits right in front of us. We have to pick one chit, and whatever's written on it, if we have done it, then we have to take a sip of this delicious Karela juice
Oh my.
that my intern has made.
Not even my mom can get me to drink this, Mahima. I'm making allowances for you today. Wow. You know, actually, this will be the first time in my life I ever touch Karela
Karela,
juice.
yeah.
I've actually managed to evade it many times.
I think this will be my second time. My friend made me try, and it was horrible.
I rejected it during the pandemic many times. Okay, you first.
Okay.
Show me how it's done.
Never have I ever lied about my whereabouts to avoid a meeting. No, I've never.
That was a lucky.
I was lucky.
Us. If only I should be so lucky. All right. Never have I ever ignored an email on purpose. I'd be lying. I get like 5,000 emails a day. Oh, it's kind of gross.
So,
I need a coffee or a chocolate or something. A carrot. It's really bad.
I think I'm actually lucky.
She has all the luck today.
Never have I ever pretended to read a book I haven't.
Oh my God. Our set team is so on your side today, Mahima. I think this is a manipulated set team. Never have I ever laughed out loud at a funny email during a meeting. I'm always laughing out loud. I feel like this juice was sent for me by the universe. Oh my God, it's so bitter.
I think universe is on my side today.
Totally, girl.
I think it's not. Never have I ever took a sick leave when I wasn't. I have during my internship period.
You say that in front of your intern. Be careful. He's on
I'm
set.
sure even he does.
Welcome to the club.
Ew.
She is now on the converted Karela side. It's pretty bad.
It's gross.
It's really
And
bad.
he has added more salt to it to make it bitter.
Oh, I think I have peace. Never have I ever bought an expensive item just to show off. No, I live for me. Peace out.
Never have I ever regretted a business decision. I have not.
Yet.
Yet.
We learn.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Never have I ever given a fake excuse to avoid a call or meeting. Well, if I want to Zoom you instead of meet you,
Okay.
this juice is really bad.
Okay. Never have I ever sent an email to the wrong person. I have not. I'm on the lucky
You're
side.
saved again. I hope I don't have. I have two. Can I pick whichever one? Let's see. Pretended to be on a call to avoid talking to someone. Yes, I have, but that's for safety. And then never have I ever bought a clothing item solely for the Instagram picture. That I haven't. So one yes and one no. Do you let me off on the juice?
We can try one more.
Go ahead.
Okay, so last one. Never have I ever Googled myself. I have.
And you should. Data is power, but this is gross.
Yeah.
Never have I ever daydreamed during a presentation. I do it all the time. Guilty as charged. And my imagination runs wild. Okay, I can't tolerate any more juice.
Yeah, I think we are done. You will drink this.
You will all drink this.
Yeah.
One shot each. You will. Oh my God, this has been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
The
so
juice
much
was
for
horrible.
joining us, Bijna. Yeah, it was horrible actually.
It was awful. I think I have to take you out for dinner and cocktails instead. Thank you. And thank you to the team. They've been amazing.
Thank you so much for joining us. The conversation has truly been inspiring and indeed insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.